Happy Bison Bonanza Day, whatever that is. I'm Dustin Addis, and I work for the state of Florida as a marine biologist. And your teacher sent me a list of questions that you wanted me to answer. And first of all, I was wondering if there was a bison fish, if that even existed, so I looked it up. There's actually a buffalo sculpin. It's a type of fish that's poisonous, actually. You could look it up. It's pretty cool. Anyway, I'll just start at the top. Why did I become a marine biologist? I suppose it really came from fishing with my grandfather and my dad growing up. I enjoyed learning about animals and biology. I was always reading books and watching documentaries about animals. I also fell in love with the beach as a kid. We'd go on vacation as a family, and I just never wanted to leave, I guess. And I promised myself I'd live there one day and work with the ocean. So what does a biologist do? What does a marine biologist do? Well, we study the ocean and marine life. It's a very broad area of study. Some people study the physical properties of the ocean, currents and things like that, or chemicals in the ocean. Some of us study the marine life. People study plankton or bacteria or coral, seagrass, fish. I study fish, invertebrates, things like crabs or things like algae, marine mammals, seabirds. There's so many topics. But we work on boats, we work underwater, we work in offices, we work in laboratories, we work in all kinds of environments like salt marshes and mangroves and bays, estuaries, open ocean, and all kinds of interesting places. Do I spend time in the ocean and researching on the ocean? What I do for Florida, for the state of Florida, is I study fish populations. I try to figure out if we're overfishing or not. And overfishing can be a bad thing. We can catch too many before they can replenish themselves. But to do that, I usually work on my computer. I play with data. But I've worked on boats in the middle of the Gulf of Mexico, and I used to tag fish. We would catch fish from way down deep, and we'd pull them up on deck, and I would put a tag in them, and I would let them go. And then somebody would catch them days, months, even years later and tell me where they ended up. And so I could see how they moved and where they went. I also used to drive around a little submersible, a little submarine with a camera on it. We called it an ROV. It's a remotely operated vehicle. To video fish schools. And I would swim that thing around underwater. It's almost like a little video game. And I would video the fish, and then I would count them later to see how many fish there were and what types of fish were there. I've also worked on electro fishing boats in rivers around Florida, where the boat has these electrodes that shock the water, and it shocks the fish, and they float up to the top. But they don't die, or the vast majority of them don't anyway. They're stunned, and so we kind of collect the ones that we're looking for, and we measure them, and then we can let them go, and so they don't die. But that's an interesting way to capture fish. What's the coolest plant or animal I've ever seen in the ocean? Well, I guess there's just too many. I've seen massive swarms of flying fish, if you've ever heard of those. They swim and they swim out of the water and spread their fins and catch the air, and then they glide And I've seen swarms of them jumping out of the water and gliding away from whatever predator was chasing them. Sometimes they would hit the side of our boat. Sometimes you'd have to duck out of the way because they're flying over your head. Some other cool animals I've seen. I've been swimming with a Goliath grouper. Now, if you look behind me, that's a Goliath grouper. It's a very big fish. Imagine a fish the size of your classroom door. And imagine being underwater with it. And they're not afraid of people either. They'll swim right up to you. They're almost like puppy dogs. You can sometimes touch them, but they're not afraid of you at all. They're very intimidating because they're so big. They could probably fit some of you in its mouth. What's my favorite ocean animal? Well, I'm partial to fish. So I'd have to say the tuna. Now, you guys think of tuna as something that comes in a can or something you eat in sushi, but they're amazing animals. They're built for speed. And for endurance. They're amazing predators. They're basically swimming mouths that just eat everything in their path. And they're very, very fast. They also maintain a warmer body temperature than the water itself, which is usually, most fish take on the temperature of the water that they swim in. But because they're swimming so fast and their muscles are working so hard, and the nature of their physiology, they keep a warmer body temperature, which increases their metabolism, makes them better at being predators. And they can swim up to 40 to 50 miles per hour underwater, which is pretty cool. Imagine that. Which leads me to the next question. What types of plants or animals do I study? I study fish. I love fish. You can see all these fish behind me. I study fish in the Gulf of Mexico and the South Atlantic that people fish for. Things like snapper and grouper and triggerfish and hogfish, mackerel, sea trout, redfish, mullet, snook. My team that I work with, we study fish populations. We try to figure out if we're fishing too much or not. We try to avoid overfishing, which can be bad for the fish population and bad for the fishermen too. What is my favorite or least favorite part about being a marine biologist? Well, something that's both my favorite and my least favorite part about being a marine biologist, or just being a scientist in general, is that you'll never know everything. You just won't. And that new knowledge is always around the corner. And once you have it figured out, you find that you're wrong a lot of times. Science is always moving forward, and you're constantly trying to keep up. So you never actually really know your job because you're always after new knowledge. Have I ever been in a shark cage? I've never been in a shark cage, but I'd totally do it if given the chance. I know how to scuba dive. I have been scuba diving with sharks in the water, and I wasn't in a cage, but they didn't bother me. When you're swimming in the ocean, sharks are always a lot closer than you realize, but you shouldn't be afraid of them, really. Just leave them be, and they'll leave you alone, too. Have I ever been in danger when exploring the ocean? Well, I've been in bad storms at sea. That's very dangerous. It feels like you're on a roller coaster that you can't get off of until the storm passes. There's things flying around inside the boat's cabin. Couches are turning over. People are getting tossed around. I had a TV fly at my face one time. But in terms of animals, I guess I've I've touched fire coral before. Have you ever heard of fire coral? It stings your skin and it burns like fire. It's very painful. I also got stung by a man-o-war jellyfish. Not as bad as my friend, but it was still very painful as well. But scuba diving has its own element of danger, as humans weren't meant to breathe underwater. I've done some deep dives on shipwrecks. I've been diving at night. Both of these are pretty risky activities, I'd say. I've seen people need stitches from touching razor-sharp fish teeth. I've seen people get hooks in their hands. I've seen people get very, very seasick. So there's a lot of unexpected things that can happen out on the ocean. Here's our last question. Do I have marine biologist friends? Well, I do. I have a lot of friends that I've met at school or work. I have friends that study sharks. I have friends that study sawfish. That's an interesting fish. I have a friend that studies crabs. She's a crab biologist. I have a friend that studies red tide. You may have heard of red tide. That occurs a lot down here in Florida. But I have a lot of friends that study fish just because I study fish. But I work with people that study all kinds of things. Corals and manatees and sea turtles, dolphins, seagrass. There's people down the hall that study oysters. So a lot of interesting people I work with. And we all enjoy what we do. We're very passionate about the ocean. So it's a pleasure to work with these folks. Well, that ends all the questions. Thanks for allowing me to talk to you guys, and have a happy Bison Bonanza Day. Bye.